I was thinking, I was like, why is it so hard to just do things? Like, if we desire it, why can't we just do it? And maybe we need to make the trophy bigger at the end of the race.
Mm.
You know what I mean? If we can start to pay attention to the outcome, like, okay, well, if I go down this path, let
Mm-hmm.
me still pay attention to um, the benefits that I'll be able to receive when I
Right.
get there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't always seem worth it. I think,
Yeah.
when you're late night and you're trying to figure out what to do with your time, you're trying to unwind. It's like, I could go over there and work on this,
Yeah.
but then the pleasure to relax is greater than the perceived pleasure of the outcome of that effort. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I think, like, you have to strengthen the belief, and like believe, almost with a blind faith. Have
Mm-hmm.
faith that whatever you're going to do, if you don't do it, you're never going to be able to see what life could be. But if you do it, then you have the opportunity to change. But having faith, like Lisa, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I have
Mm-hmm.
faith that it's worth the
Yeah.
try.
Yeah. 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 I saw something recent that I thought was interesting, and it was, I don't know if it was Tim Grover that said it, but it was something about Jordan.
Uh-huh.
And the what I think it might have been a clip from The Last Dance that maybe they took from the big Last Dance and made it into a reel.
Okay.
And what they said is that Jordan's greatest gift was the ability to be present
Right.
and not project future or not project past. And I think we're all guilty of that. And what I think what's a roadblock that keeps the parking brake on for a lot of us, right? Like, I'm hitting the
Yeah.
gas, we're not moving as fast as we could. Why not? I think many of us are projecting the car accident we got in
Right.
5 years ago, and then also the projection forward, because we live in a fear-based media system where it's projecting forward if you could get into a car accident and die. So I think that metaphor applies as to why aren't we driving as hard as we can.
Right.
Right? We study how to drive well. We watch other drivers, right? Everyone's watching the cars go around the track, but how many can actually do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the exact same metaphor in life. There's a lot of people that are lifing real well.
Right.
And we love to watch from the stands and say, oh, that makes sense. Absolutely, I could do it. But are we doing that? And the compliment that this guy gave Jordan was he had never met anyone in his life. And he said his biggest gift was being able to be present in every single moment. And I watched an interview, clip reel, 60 seconds of Kobe. So coincidentally, who happened to be both in the same bucket. That's probably why I thought of Grover. And they asked him about, what if you don't make it? What if you fail? And his whole reaction was bewilderment of, I don't even think about that, right? Because everything is present. Everything is, what am I doing right now?
Right. That can make me better.
That can make me better.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were saying that, the thing that was popping up in my head, I'm like, well, as simple as it sounds, I think we can all look at it and just say the F word is fear. Everything has to do with fear of failing, fear of how it will look to fail, fear of, and the older I get, it's this idea of protecting your ego, right? Because I've said before, I'm like, no, ego's not the enemy. And I stand by that. Ego's not the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Fragile ego versus a strong ego, right? That's where you start to work in humility or in pride, right? Fragile ego, pride, strong ego, humility. So what's that daily battle that we're on that meter, right? So it really has to do with those. And now the other part of that I've added, which is protecting your ego. So I think sometimes we don't put in the work. I think sometimes we don't go in the gym, right? Because, listen, when I get under that bar, I'm not putting what you're putting up. I'm not putting what probably the majority of those guys are putting up. Right. They've also put in more time than I have.
Right.
But if I'm putting up a plate and they're putting up 2 plates, 3, 2.5, 3.
Mm-hmm.
But what could be keeping me from getting under the bar? Protecting my ego, right? So I think that's an interesting way to frame it of, is my lack of action actually a way of protecting my ego? And catching ourselves and saying like, well, why am I not taking action? Why am I not taking action? Am I protecting my ego? And now, then that says I need to work on my ego so that it doesn't need protecting. You see what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
now it kind of encompasses this whole theory of number one, ego is not the enemy. Number two, the act of pride and humility come based on where you happen to be at that moment within your ego. And I think that it's not just a general thing. I think depending on the field that we're on,
No.
it can affect where we are within our pride and ego.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of professional football players that I bet if you put them on the basketball court would be acting in, protecting their ego real quick
Right.
because they're a professional athlete, but they're getting their ass handed to them on the basketball court.
Yep.
So they might protect their ego, and you know what they do? They never go on the basketball court, do they? They stay off the court.
Mm-hmm.
They stay off the court. But because we've had some success on another field, maybe we don't go on to another field. And I think that that's an interesting way to frame it. Like, are we protecting our egos by not taking the shot? Right? If you're a professional athlete that's competed at the highest level of football and your field goal percentage is 5% because you can't shoot, you might be protecting your ego by not getting on the court.
Mm-hmm.
So then therein lies the question. The shots that we're not taking is the reason we're not taking the shots that we know we should be taking. Is it a form of protecting our ego? And then that's also a form of pride. So I think it all falls underneath there. So that goes back to your original question was, what is it that might be keeping us from doing what we're supposed to do? And I think it's less about motivation and more about fear of something. And then a way to protect against the fear is to then protect your ego. And if we can get away with not doing it all, why would we do it? That is a form of protecting our ego in the first place because, hey, listen, if there's a jumping contest and you don't jump that high, if there's a jumping contest and you don't jump that high, then one way to protect your ego is to not compete.
True.
Sitting on the sideline saying, I could do the same kind of a podcast they could do. I could do the same kind of a business that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
I could have the same kind of relationship that he has. I could be the same kind of father that he is. Okay, great, no problem. You've acquired the knowledge. But now that you have that knowledge, are you protecting your ego by not getting on the field and competing? And is that keeping you from getting in the game? So that's one concept in theory. When it comes back to what you were saying, which was, why are we not taking the shots that we know we should be taking?
Oh, big time. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people do. We do protect the ego. We have ego, and it does take effort to learn how to control it, identify when you need to make adjustments, when it's working in your favor, when it's not working in your favor. Totally, totally. A lot of times it's a fear of failing because we just don't like when we're not good at something. And if generally as an adults, if we're not good at something, we're not going to do it. We're just not going to do it. We stay away from things we're not so good at. That's why one of the greatest symbolisms of growth is they say get uncomfortable, do something you've never done, go learn something new, go stretch yourself, go bungee jump, do something crazy, right? Just to get outside of your shell, and that's how you get outside of your shell and expand your environment. As you have to do something new, so it's a discomfort that I think as we avoid, and it's a good prescription to say, hey, tame your ego. You know what I mean? That's one thing is be a little less serious.